show where you get the best franchise chat. It is the show where you find what's under the hat. It's a franchise show. Yeah. It is the show where you get the best franchise guests. Yes. It is the show where you...
Hello everyone and welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you enjoy my new jingle. It makes me laugh every time now. This is the Franchise Show, and of course this is the show where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's February the 3rd, 2026 at around 5:15 for about 50 minutes. And because it's live, we love you to get involved. We love you to say hello. We love you to get involved in our conversations. So please say hello. Now, what do we do on the Franchise Show? Each week we take a new topic and a lovely guest, or in this case, two lovely guests. And we have a bit of a deep delve into that topic. So first of all, the topic that we're going to be talking today on the Franchise Show is QSR, Ops Manuals Made Easy. Now, we've got two lovely people to talk about this fantastic subject. We've, of course, got our fantastic supporter and long-time guest of the show, returning, I don't know, probably about 20 times now. But it's always fantastic to have Penny on the Franchise Show. Penny, welcome back to the Franchise Show.
Thank you, Harvey. I'm delighted to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And joining Penny, we've got the fantastic Andrew Emerson. Andrew, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Thank you, Harvey.
You're absolutely welcome. Well, before we get into today's subject and topic and have a good deep delve into that, let's find out a little bit about our guests. First of all, let's go ladies first, of course. So Penny, everyone's going to know you, Penny, but perhaps you can do a little introduction to yourself. And of course, there's something exciting happening this month, of course. So perhaps you can do a little introduction to that as well.
Absolutely, Harvey. Thank you. Well, I'm Penny from Manual Magic AI. And I am, for anyone who doesn't know Manual Magic AI, it's the manifestation, if you like, of my book of the same name, Manual Magic, Create the Operations Manual Your Franchisees Need to Succeed. And it follows the 3-step system, and it's for franchisors who would like to either create or update their operations manuals. And it's going to launch on the 17th of February. Which you could probably see up on the screen. And so we would be absolutely delighted if you would join the live launch with Simon Wise, who is hosting. And you'll see the demonstration of the platform, and you'll be able to take advantage of a special offer for 48 hours.
Ooh. Exciting stuff. Thank you so much, Penny. Fantastic introduction. It's an exciting month. It's always been an absolute pleasure to support you and what you do, and I think this is going to be a fantastic platform for franchisors as they look at their ops manuals and find easier ways of doing it. So let's move now to the fantastic and wonderful Andrew. Andrew, again, welcome to the show. Perhaps you could give a little introduction to yourself. Sort of what sort of things have you been up to, what's brought you to this point?
Okay, well, career for me was 10 years in the UK pub sector, 1985 to 1995. And then I began my journey in franchising when I moved to Dunkin' Donuts in America in 1995. I was based in the New England market, which is the biggest and most successful part of the brand. I was the general manager responsible for about 500 sites across New England. 2001 came back to the UK, and in that time I've worked as the brand director for Upper Crust, MD for Millie's Cookies, and my last full-time job was with Domino's Pizza Group. Now, I'm sure you're getting a theme here. They're all to do with food, and you can see by the size of it, I do like my food. In fact, my first food business was a big steak pub chain, which was part of Tetley's back in the day. And yeah, that was my last job at Domino's Pizza Group. And then in the last 13 years, I've been helping franchise businesses succeed. Issues around relationships, governance, training, support, etc. And that's what I do now. I help companies, franchise businesses be better franchisors and help them make help their franchisees succeed.
Amazing, fantastic introduction. It's going to be really interesting to sort of get your take and your experience on all of these different ops manuals. I mean, you mentioned some incredible brands there, and using that experience to now help franchisors with all sorts of aspects. I mean, we're looking a lot today about ops manuals, but ops manuals can incorporate all sorts of elements.
When I joined Dunkin' Donuts, first 6 weeks was at Dunkin' Donut University, where you're given massive satchel full of manuals about everything to do with production and management of the stores. Literally, it would fill my entire desk, weighed about 30 pounds. And I was really excited getting this really professional manual. And Penny will tell us that those things don't exist anymore. But back in the day, 30 years ago, I was a proud recipient of my Dunkin' Donut manuals, and my graduation certificate is somewhere in my office here when I graduated at Dunkin' Donuts.
Fantastic. I love it. I mean, we're absolutely going to get into that because, you're right. I mean, ops manuals can be, a sort of a doorstep of a document, something that can help you reach something that's on a higher shelf. And we're definitely going to get to that.
Yeah.
But before we do, let's welcome a few people who have joined us here already live on the Franchise Show. First of all, I'd like to welcome the lovely Leslie Flowers, coming all the way from North Carolina. Leslie has a fantastic show on a Friday called all about the book Think and Grow Rich. Do check that out. She's put hello, Harvey, Tuck and Guess, coming from Raleigh, North Carolina. Always fantastic to have you with us. We have the lovely Nick Pleven with us. Nick is one of our fantastic supporters. It's always good to have you with us, Nick. It's going to be great to hear your thoughts on ops manuals as we go along today, but great to have you with us. Who else have we got? We've got Joanne Lyons. I had a fantastic conversation with Joanne today, in fact. So it's great to have you with us, Joanne. Let us know your thoughts on ops manuals. And Joanne has put, hello, newbie here. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're new or whether you've been here 100 times. You're absolutely welcome and you're completely part of our fantastic conversations. So let's quickly go to Simon. We've been talking about Simon already, so let's welcome the fantastic Simon Wise. He is a recruiter in our fantastic franchise industry, and somebody who has been a big supporter of what I've been doing on LinkedIn. It's always good to have you with us, Simon. Simon's put, hello, franchise friends from the beautiful banks of the River Colne in the shadow of Hertfordshire landfill, with the gentle waft of sewage works, shimmering lights, discarded shopping trolleys. Beautiful image you've created there, Simon. Beautiful. This is alluding to the lovely Joe Caruso, who always tries to make me pronounce where he lives in the US, and it certainly sounds very beautiful, almost as beautiful as that, Simon. And we've got Colin Reese with us. He's put hi all. Well, hi to you, Colin. Great for you to be with us. Please let us know your thoughts and share your experiences with ops manuals and making them easy. So let's get into this. Let's go to Penny first, and let's start with, I guess let's start with where ops manuals might begin. You've created this platform that's really taken them from what Andrew was talking about, which was a satchel that probably could create back problems, now to a platform that is so intuitive, so in tune with the users of that. How do you think ops manuals have traveled along this journey over the years?
Well, it's been really interesting because when I first started back in 1987, of course, we didn't really have a digital age. It was all hard copy, and the cost of producing manuals was phenomenal. Even when I did the Costa Coffee manuals in 2006 to 2009, it took those 3 years to do 5 volumes. It was a really expensive production with everything included. I don't know that there was much change out of probably about 50,000 to 60,000 pounds. And then, of course, we did go to PDFs. I think with Costa, we did find a solution. I said, well, how about putting it on PDFs on a CD-ROM? Who can remember a CD-ROM now? So, of course, the internet evolved and so on and so forth. And with the advent of AI, I was an early adopter, very early adopter. As soon as it hit the headlines, I was fiddling around with it, seeing what I could do. And it has just evolved at such a pace that instead of taking, my clients would typically take between 6 and 12 months to create a manual online. You don't have that luxury these days. You can do it within a fraction of the time now. If you upload your intellectual property onto the platform, it'll sort it into 6 categories, which follow the balanced scorecard. You get your SOP in draft, and then there's absolutely no replacement for the human expertise. We actually amplify expertise to put the finishing touches on the SOP, and you can create checklists in a nanosecond. You can then do FAQs in a nanosecond, and then turn the SOP into a storyboard ready for video. And that's really where we are today, because in QSR, nobody wants to read text-heavy manuals.
No.
It's all instant. You don't have time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are getting a few comments that LinkedIn appears to be repeating the first few minutes of today's show. If that is the case, we will put out this show and people can watch it at their leisure. But we're going to continue the conversation today because it's a fantastic conversation already. And Penny, that was a really, really interesting take and history that you sort of took us through, ops manuals as they were in sort of 85. Andrew was talking about starting his pub career in 87, that you were starting things there, very text heavy, very hard to get to the relevant information. And it's really interesting how that journey has continued along. Andrew, you mentioned there when you went to the Dunking University and you got your satchel with your ops manual in there, and it was an amazing thing. And like Penny alluded to, a really expensive and time-consuming thing to create. What was your sort of view on it? You said you were kind of excited to get it at that point, but
yeah, I was a complete novice. Obviously, I'd come from the UK pub business, which couldn't be further or different to Dunkin' Donuts business, which is all about coffee and donuts. You had to learn the production processes around making donuts and coffee and all the other products that Dunkin' sold. And then you shifted to a classroom to learn the management techniques needed to run a franchise and to be a manager of one of those franchises. But for me, actually, after doing that Dunkin' Donut University section, I was lucky that I didn't take over my region until the first of the year. So I had about 4 weeks where I just worked in store. And for me, actually, it all came alive when I was there dealing with high volume numbers of customers day in, day out. and I travelled the region that was going to become where I worked with most of the leading franchisees as one of their shift members, and just learned the ropes that way by serving customers. And then you're able to translate the manual into what really happened. For example, in Dunkin', there's a cleaning process for the coffee machines, and everybody as a rookie makes a certain mistakes where you press the button twice and you get hot water all over the counter. They all were waiting for me to do that because they knew that was going to happen. So as much as the manual told me don't press the button twice, unfortunately, we know what we're like with buttons. We have to press them more than once, and they just let me make the mistake and then learn from doing it.
That's really interesting how in your experience, even with that brand, it sort of went from this static ops manuals to something that was realer, something that felt different, something that you could use a little bit more with the classroom and the training. And I guess that's what's happening with our ops manuals, with the way that we're trying to put that in with QR codes, with video, with interaction in these ops manuals to make them something that isn't a manual. When you think of a manual, you think of just this thick thing that you're trying to flick through and find what's relevant. You know, it's now something that's very intuitive, isn't it, Penny?
Yeah.
Yes. With QR codes, of course, we can generate them and you can put them on the coffee machine. And I use the analogy that somebody, a barista, has to strip down and clean the coffee machine at the end of the day and can't quite remember the steps, so consults the QR code. It goes straight to the procedure. There is no going through a portal, there's no searching. There it is immediately. So you've got it instantly. And if you go further from creating the video, you can, with another platform that we sort of partner with, manual.to, you can break that video down into bite-sized steps and access it in any language, listen to it, watch it, or read it.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing that, you know, that you can do that across all these different languages and cultures as well, because taking an ops manual and then trying to make that appropriate for another culture, another language, in the past would have been months and tens, if not hundreds of thousands, to make sure the nuances have been passed across. Incredible thing to be able to do.
And of course, you've got a single source of truth, which is really difficult. I mean, Costa is now, I think, 4,000 units strong, and you cannot get the same level of quality on a network, across a network of that scale. A manager will always, at some point, delegate, and the training quality will very often suffer. Video is a single source of truth that can't be denied, so the replication is more faithful across the network.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. This single source as well, you know, this is something that we've got to be careful of. You know, Andrew, when you spoke about your first encounter with those ops manuals, inside that satchel was that single source of truth. Everything within that related back to that brand, the brand standards of that brand, and as long as you didn't look at another document and you looked at that one, you're going to find, at least at that point in time, where they created it, at least. And this is the other thing, isn't it? You know, you could look back on this and go, okay, well, that's how we want us to do this particular thing, but actually that might have been written a year ago.
And things evolve, Harvey. You know, brand standards change, training techniques change, new products are introduced. So in Dunkin', we introduced bagels and coffee culotta, completely new products for the brand to administer. So the manual that I learnt in 1995, by 1997, that physical copy was probably out of date. But by then, as Penny alluded, things were transitioning to CDs, DVDs, other tools that were available, and you weren't physically putting a paper update in your manual as was the case prior to that time. Because if you're a franchisee, you're buying a system, you're buying a know-how, you're buying a guide to operating the business, and you want it to be alive and evolving. And if you're a good franchisor, there's always something new that's being developed that you want to share with your franchisees. So a tool like Penny's would be great for that. I wish those things would have been available back in the day when I was trying to ensure franchisees were complying with brand standards to the extent that they could and should.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this has just developed over the years, you know, and how it's got from something very static, very uninteractive. Is that a word? I think it is. But something that you can't change very easily. And if you do, it's got to go back through all of these different things. You know, when you've got something that is so intuitive, so interactive, you know, even perhaps even a member of staff or a franchisee can put up a suggestion, you know, it can filter its way up, and you know that can then be potentially incorporated into that document almost instantly. Penny, do you think?
Well, this is our version 1. In version 2, after the first quarter, we are looking at gamification, because it's one thing to have your manual in one place, instantly accessible in various shapes and forms, but it's another to get total engagement for continuous improvement. So what we are going to do is to create a part of the app where all team members can be involved in the across the network. We very seldom look at the tiny tweaks that franchisees make to the system, because they're not really supposed to, are they? You know, they're supposed to replicate it faithfully, but they do. They find little ways of either improving incidents, accident rates, improving wastage, customer satisfaction, customer engagement, and nobody ever knows. So what we want to do is to create a leaderboard every month and enable every team member to make a suggestion. The best one of the month, that team member gets to the top of the leaderboard and gets, let's say, £100 Amazon voucher. And that's done throughout the year. And at the annual conference, there is the top prize for the idea that has led to the greatest significance for the whole network, that saved the most money, and they get £1,000. And their team is given a sum towards training of their choice. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing is, it's all part of the gamification that we want to introduce.
I mean, it's a fantastic idea to try and reward members of staff, franchisees for their ideas. We've talked about this many times on this show, where you've got franchisees or staff, and I think this is the same in any business actually. If you're not being listened to, if you're not being heard, if you've got an idea and you want to put that across, and there's not any kind of way that you can put that idea across, you can get really frustrated as a franchisee or as a member of staff if you're not being listened to. Andrew, in your experience, did you get that? How were ideas formulated? You know, did you see those come up through different members of staff, through franchisees, through different members of the teams over the years?
Yeah, I can share with you one, I think, excellent example. In Domino's, we, the senior directors of the business, travelled the country constantly and held what we call franchise dinners, probably in 12 to 14 different locations across the UK and Ireland annually, where we'd invite all the local franchisees to come and join us for a social event dinner. And then probably someone like myself, or maybe a guy like Colin, the IT guy, or other people would present what their subject matter was, maybe for 20, 15 minutes. Then we'd have dinner, and it was after dinner where the real feedback occurred, where they'd tell us about our initiatives and what was working, what wasn't working. And I found that to be the best way of listening to the franchisees. And through those franchisees, you will hear the voice of their staff in that particular environment. And then one of my first clients when I became a independent consultant was the Timpson Group. So I'm sure you might know about John and James Timpson. Their business acquired a business called Snappy Snaps, and he wanted to bring the same philosophy of constantly visiting stores, listening to staff. They call them colleagues within their business, listening to what they say, and evolving the brands that they operate through feedback from their staff. So I've had the pleasure to work with probably the best in the country in listening to their colleagues at the sharp end. James and John would be spending 4 days a week traveling, visiting 20, 30 stores a day. And they still do that, or at least John does.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, look, I think that's really interesting what you said there about using these social events as well as ways to put people at ease, let people know that they can have a conversation and that it's going to be that you're going to just sit there and listen and it's slightly less formal. I think that there's a real place for these sort of social parts of franchising.
I've had more formal, franchisee advisory councils and leadership groups. America was very structured around that. Dunkin' Donuts had a whole series of district and national leadership that you dealt with. And Domino's was much more of a social environment. There's two extremes there. They both can work. It's just using whatever the sort of way, the way we do things round here is the sort of things the phrase I use to try and implement good communications and good support.
No, absolutely. I think it's a good mix of the two. And I mean, you were talking about these sort of, I don't know, like peer groups and things like that, where you get franchisees to talk to one another. But look, in the end, our ops manuals for a franchise business are the core of our business. They're where the idea was formulated into something repeatable, something scalable, something that has values attached to it. And therefore it shouldn't be a document that's lost to a satchel. I use your analogy there because I can really picture when you said it was in a satchel, I can picture that big document in there, and you probably needed something that you can carry it fairly robustly. But the reality is it's not often perhaps referred to, and maybe it should. Someone was talking to me the other day and I'd sort of forgotten about these things, but do you remember the Haynes manuals, the car ones?
Yes.
Very well.
And I remember them very fondly when I had my first car, because I had a manual and it was always thumbed with sort of greasy, oily marks where I had attempted to try and fix my first car with the help of a mechanic friend who lived down the road. But I think if you saw a pristine version of a Haynes manual, it sort of demonstrates the fact that things can just stay in a manual and be lost there.
Yeah.
If it's covered in, I don't know, bits of food, we're talking about the food industry here, and someone's constantly referred to it, then that was perhaps an indication back in the day. If you looked at your operator's manual and it was well thumbed, you'd know at least it was being looked at and it wasn't just stuck up there on the shelf.
Yeah, in the pub business, we used to have a seller card that you could go in and whoever visited that pub that day from the company, Tetley's or whoever else, whoever visited signed the card and made comments about what they saw. And I always used to go into the cellar and look and see who was the last area manager, the last trade director that had signed the card. It was like a history lesson of the history of Allied Breweries and Tetley Pub Company. as to who had been in that role before me. So yeah, these things they're not new. They've reinvented themselves over generations. It's just updating them with new technology, as Penny's doing. It's an original way of going about a very old story.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking about Ops Manuals Made Easy. I'm aware that LinkedIn has some issues today, but this is going to be recorded and we will promote and put it out all over the place. And then you can have a look at it, as I say, at your leisure. It's been a really interesting conversation so far. You know, we've really heard the sort of the history of Ops Manuals and how they begun with Andrew's experience with various different brands, and now how they're evolving with what Penny is doing, and how they're becoming very interactive. I guess, Penny, are we gonna stop referring them to as Ops Manuals soon? Are we gonna have to come up with a new term?
Well, I did coin a new term in my book. I'd like to think of an Ops Manual as a knowledge sharing environment, where a dynamic knowledge sharing environment where everyone can participate, learn and grow. Because as we move towards a multi-generational workforce, and by 2030, 30% of the global workforce will be under 30. We have to do things differently. The under 30s prefer a bottom-up approach. They want to feel engaged and valued, and they will not read text-heavy material. They're the YouTube, TikTok, Instagram generation. And it won't be long before we have a new generation, and they're digital natives. So they definitely won't be reading text. So my belief is that we should think in terms of knowledge sharing rather than the rather dictatorial operations manual, which the young people don't identify with, and particularly in QSR, because you do have young workforces.
Yeah, you do, and you're right. They just don't identify with it. This text-heavy book, and look, I understood it at the beginning when you get a sort of a team of people together. They want to sort of sew something up into this like protected document that they know that's the document. There it is. We've done it. It's can't be changed. Right. And there's, I don't know, in their minds, maybe there's something that they're protecting in that, but actually it should change. It has to change. It has to keep evolving. And just because something evolves, it doesn't mean to say it's not going to be true to its core values, to the values of the business, because there are mechanics in place. I mean, you know, in your sort of mind with this version 2, where things can alter on that Ops Manual, how would you see that happening if something had to change on the Ops Manual? You know, how would that be put in and then put out to that network that are using that in a way that's different to an update to a physical manual?
Very simple. You upload it as an asset, and it sits within the platform. And every week, at the moment, it can go daily, but every week, every reader, every user of the manual will be given a rundown of the updates.
Okay.
And it will also enable you, particularly if you're in the UK and the franchise agreement dictates that you must have a manual. The other thing that it dictates is that it must be up to date. And I think there are an awful lot of franchisors out there who are in breach of the agreement on that basis.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I mean, Andrew, you know, in your experience with all those brands and now advising people, how do you get people to sort of keep things up to date? We're talking about ops manuals here, but do you advise sort of regular meetings?
I do, yes. So I'm better using the examples rather than giving you the theory. So Timpson bought Snappy Snaps. That business franchise, about 120 stores, was a manual in place that hadn't been looked at for quite some time, as Penny had just said. And we were keen to grow the business, but without that manual being right, I didn't want to recruit new franchisees until we were happy with systems being in place to help those new franchisees. It was all right for the existing people. They'd been in the business a long time. The manual wasn't helping their day-to-day work because they already knew it. But if you were new, you would really need that source document. And what we did for the first year was just update it and bring forward all the things that represented best practice within Snappy Snaps, redid the manual, introduced it to the franchise community, and ensured that that was what was used to train all the new franchisees that we went out and about recruiting from about 18 months on from when James and John bought the business. And in a more recent client I've just been working with, he's got a burger business, really high unit economics, great system, but no manuals, nothing that could be given to a potential franchisee. And I'm saying to him, you bring someone in to look at this store, the first things the smart guys will ask is, well, what's the system? What do we follow? And if it's all in someone's head or written in paper somewhere, it's not going to be replicable beyond your management team. So I helped him put together what Penny's talking about in terms of systematizing his day-to-day operations, giving him a platform to franchise. So I can give you every example you can imagine, but this is a live document that needs to be referred to. And I'm with you, Penny, that sometimes it just gets lost because people are so busy running a business, they don't step away sometimes. And they're wondering why people aren't happy and why there's fallouts and meeting attendance is low or people aren't renewing. And I just go back to the sort of basics to find out what that problem might be. And it's typically in this sort of detail that gets lost.
Yeah, I think that's it. It can get lost. It can get lost if you don't keep it relevant and you don't keep it interesting and you're not presenting it in a way that's appealing to that audience. I'm going to give you a little example, but I recently had to do some health and safety training. Exciting stuff, I know, edge of your seat type stuff. But actually, the organization that put this health and safety training together, and it must have been sent to many companies, right? They did it as a series of like police crime dramas that were really quite professionally put together. It was actually quite captivating. I binge watched it, but the point is, it's presenting it in a different way than a PowerPoint or than an ops manual and something that is not appealing to an audience. I think, Andrew, you made another really interesting point, which I'm going to touch upon, that when someone's got the hang of something that's in an ops manual, let's talk about a coffee shop. Penny, you mentioned Costa there, but let's talk about a coffee shop or a bakery or a restaurant or a QSR, and it's how to make a thing, either make a coffee or how to make a burger. Now, of course, when you're new, you might have a look in the ops manual to find out how you make that burger, and you put it together how that standard operating procedure, that SOP, tells you to do it. But of course, once you've been there for 3 months, you know how to put that burger together and you just put it together. Do you think there's ever any dangers in dilution of what's in an ops manual when people think, yeah, I've got that now, right? And therefore, is there better ways to keep people engaged and make sure that offer, that quality doesn't dilute as things progress?
Well, Penny, you go. I can talk about this all day, but I'll let you go because this is right where I'm into.
Well, yes, I think there is a danger. It's just sort of complacency, isn't it? And I think that people, it's human nature to do something slightly different and go off your beaten track, whatever it is, regardless of whether it's a burger or a coffee. it's not being lazy. It's just wanting to be a little different to make the routine slightly more exciting. And if you innovate, you're away from the core business and the brand value.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because innovation is, it's certainly normally seen in most circles as a good, positive thing. But if you're in a franchise business and you innovate too much and you go away from what it is you've bought into or you're trying to protect, because we're talking there a little bit about dilution. And like you say, if you innovate and you change something, and then the next person you teach innovates and they change something, 10 processes on, that's completely changed. Okay, it might have a positive reason behind it, someone's trying to improve something, but that's when suddenly you'll go into one brand in one part of the country or part of the world, and you're going to the same brand, and you'll get something completely different because somebody is innovating. Andrew, what's your experience with innovation and how that can be brought into a business that still fits within SOPs, fits within brand culture and SOPs and so forth?
Yeah, it has its place. And Penny talked about how good ideas could be fed through to management teams, marketing and training to make improvements constantly. But I'm quite hard and fast on this. If you're going to be in a franchise, you're buying into a system and you have to think systemically. It is not an individual business. You're not just using the logo, you're using the whole know-how to operate this business, and there is no compromise, zero. I want feedback, I want to make it better, don't get me wrong, but it's not the franchisee's job or their staff to address change standards. That's the franchisor's core responsibility. That's what you're paying your franchise fees for. That's what the intellectual property and the logo says. So I have no truck with that. And therefore, a franchise system has to have guardrails in place, control systems, audits, etc. Plus, we've got access to much more customer feedback than they ever had when I was operating. And you can look at TripAdvisor and other feedback tools to see what the customer experience really is like. Plus, for many of the QSR businesses, they're using third parties to deliver their food. And there's another risk to the quality of your operation when other people are handling the delivery of your product. So there's a whole host of things that a franchisor needs to put in place, particularly in the QSR sector, to keep it tight. You think McDonald's allow any discretion on anything that they operate? Not a bit. However, they will listen to good franchisees, and most of the great products that you love in McDonald's were all ideas from franchisees. They didn't come from head office. So hopefully you understand I'm saying two things can be true at the same time. Listen to innovate and have no allowance of people varying standards because they think it's a good idea and it's an easy thing to do.
No, I love that. I mean, I was talking to Tom Corrigan from Chicken Cottage the other week, and we talked about McDonald's, and we talked about the fact that the Big Mac came from a franchisee. But it's how you do it, how it comes across. There are different ways to do that within your business, and I think as long as you talk to your franchisor or your franchisee and you work out the best way that can be put to the business. Oh, fantastic. Let's have a little look. We've got a comment that looks like it's coming from me, but it's actually from Simon Wise. He's put, if they have no manuals, how can they legally demonstrate transfer of know-how which is integral to the relationship? This is an interesting one, actually. So when a manual, if that is the IP, the thing you're buying, there it is. There's the big doorstep of a document. Is there any difficulties when that is now electronic and in that format? Can it still be protected and offered in the same way, Penny?
Yes, it can. What is written down is recorded, And the manual, whether it's a franchise system or not, if it's written down, you're protecting your IP because it's your copyright and it can be proven. If you don't, then anybody can take that idea and take your system and replicate it. I had just that situation. In fact, it wasn't that they hadn't written it down, they had. But somebody came to me, this is many, many years ago, and said, Penny, I want help with our manual. I've just changed from being a franchisee to a franchisor of my own business. It is in the same sector. And he said, I don't want you to rewrite it. I don't want a new manual. I want you just to change the name of the franchise throughout the manual.
Right. Okay.
I basically said that's a total breach of copyright and you are passing off. It's a very bad thing to do. And my advice is don't do it.
Absolutely. Well, good advice there. Well, look, we have come to the end of the first part of today's show. It's been a fantastic conversation. We're going to be putting this out all over LinkedIn, despite them not letting us put this out live exactly today. But please pop in some comments when you have had a chance to look at this. We're also going to clip up a few parts of today's show, so you will be able to see that as well. So this is now the part of the show where my screen will go blank for a little bit because you're not allowed to see me without wearing some sort of hat. And now I've got, of course, a absolute beauty on. There it is. Now this is the part of the show that's brought to you by PJ Murphy and Sons, bespoke British hatters. And this is my lovely friend Paul Murphy, who works for Flip Out. And if you would like a hat like this, then please reach out to Paul. Now, this is also the part of the show that we're going to stop talking about franchising and ops manuals for a little bit. And we're going to find out a little bit about one of our guests. It is also the part of the show that our guest gets to get their own back on me. Now, because Penny has been subject to this many, many times before, we're going to pick on poor Andrew here.
Okay.
So, Andrew, I'm going to ask you a fairly light-hearted thing here. Have you met anyone famous? Have you got a claim to fame? Or any kind of crazy, unusual hobbies that you can share?
Yeah, well, I suppose my claim to fame is that whilst at university, I had another job. I was a singing telegram and didn't do particularly well with it. I can have a decent singing voice, but to help me pay for some of my nights out at university, my then girlfriend, now wife, did run a singing telegram business in Warrington. That has come back to haunt me a couple of times years later when someone said, were you not that singing telegram guy when I was out in a more serious professional capacity when I was working for Tetley's? So yeah, and then in terms of famous people, I live in the home of rugby league here in Warrington, so we're full of famous rugby players that hang out in the same sort of places that I do. Your audience won't know any of them, but I certainly do, and I get a kick every time I see them when I'm in my day-to-day life.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you for sharing that with us. As promised, now you can let me get away with this. Not anyone has so far, but you can now ask me any question you like. And I genuinely...
Okay, I've been thinking about this. Okay. What biscuit are you most like?
It's a good question.
So, for example, most people think I'm like a big, thick chocolate-covered custard cream. Okay, I accept that. What would be your equivalent?
What biscuit am I most like? I don't know why hobnob has come to mind, but hobnob has come to mind.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's because I do like a hobnob. I like dunking a hobnob in a cup of tea. It's crunchy. It feels maybe even a little bit healthy. It's a good all rounder of a biscuit. So I don't know why, but I'm going to say hobnob.
There you go. Like it.
Fantastic. Well, look, we have now come to the end of today's episode of the Franchise Show. It was an absolute pleasure to have everyone with us. Thank you for joining us early on, everyone who has been here. Thank you for watching this in the future. Please pop in comments into LinkedIn and YouTube if you're watching this in the future. We're going to keep an eye on it and we can respond to those in the future. So thank you to everyone there. Thank you also, of course, to our lovely guests, the wonderful Penny Hopkinson from Manual Magic AI, and the lovely Andrew Emerson. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you both on the show. Thank you for taking your time out this evening to be with us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Excellent. So that just leaves me to say what is happening next week on the Franchise Show. So next week we are going to be talking about the big one. We're going to be talking about franchise regulation. Should the UK be regulated? It's going to be a hot topic, and we're going to have people on both sides of this argument. So it's going to be a very interesting one. We're going to have Stuart German from who is one of our fantastic supporters. He's going to be with us. He is a lawyer in New Zealand, which is also not regulated. So it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So please join us next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And until next time, my friends, take very good